Hello and welcome everyone. This is your astrology forecast for new moon in Gemini. And this one is happening on the 26th and or 27th depending on where you are in the world, but no matter where you are, you're going to feel this a couple of days before and a couple of days after the exact date. And there's a lot more going on besides the new moon in Gemini because big transits, big shifts are happening, and we are faced with some things that we have been trying to justify to ourselves, to explain, or to somehow blame it on others. We are being faced with certain things that definitely need to be redefined and completely transformed. This is time for shift of perception, and when we shift the perception, we shift the whole world. It's simple as that, but we are not simple beings. So that's why it's so hard to be simple and to simplify life. We try so hard, but we always complicate it. And this new moon in Gemini is here to bring us new beginnings, new way of seeing things, new perceptions, new mental patterns, new ways of dealing with the truth and lies that we tell to ourselves and to others. The truth and lies that we experience in the world we live in, and the truth and lies we experience with people we share our lives with. And it's easy to spiritualize our own dishonesty and lack of integrity. It's very hard these days to know who is telling the truth and who is real, who is honest. It's even hard for ourselves to say if we are telling the truth to ourselves, because we are going to be faced with lies that we tell to ourselves, with things that we present as our truth, but it's actually something that we've been using as self-defensive mechanism, and we managed to deceive ourselves. So we are going to be faced with our own deceptions, with self-deceptive behaviors and words and narratives. And it's time to change the narrative. Gemini, communication, narratives, words, thoughts, mental patterns, skills, intellectual skills, mental skills, social skills, all these things will be in the spotlight during this time. And it's easy to pretend that we are more honorable than we are, and we'll be faced with that kind of that kind of interpretation of ourselves. It's time to question what we think, how we speak, what we speak, how we share information, with who we share information, what kind of tone do we use, in what kind of situations. We are tested now, definitely, and it's time for a new way of communicating. It's time for big changes in how we communicate and how we express our inner world through our ideas, opinions, and words. And we are questioning also what we hear and say. And we question our knowledge, we question our education, we question what we know. And it's time for unlearning things that are not serving us. And it's time to learn things in a new way, to learn the same things, to study same things that we've already learned and studied in a new way, and to see things with new eyes, to see something that we've been telling to ourselves with new eyes. Because this is new moon, it's time for new beginnings. But new moons are also time when we are experiencing the darkness within ourselves, because the moon is not visible in the sky during the time of the new moon. And it's time when everything withdraws, and when we don't see, we see the darkness, and we are waiting for new life. So it's time when we are being prepared for something new. So it's not easy. It's like that moment when the seed is about to sprout and to come to life, to reach the sun rays. after being in the darkness. So it's time for us, when we are waiting for that something, we know it's there, and it's just about to happen, this new birth. And we are questioning information that we receive from ourselves, from our intuition, which could be our ego pretending to be our intuition. So it's very tricky energy as well, because we can easily misinterpret something as our intuition. So it's very important to know how to listen to ourselves and how to be brutally honest with ourselves. And we are also questioning social media. We are questioning news and information that we hear from all over the world, from the news and radio. I mean, it's it's a complete mess, and we may feel like a complete mess. So it's time for us to withdraw a little bit from that social noise and to reset our nervous system, because Mercury in Gemini, it's related to nervous system. And we are now asked to step back from that verbal noise. Even though it's Gemini, of course, we will be involved in many conversations, and we are about probably to go through a lot of social activities, also going through emails, news and messages, texting, talking, chit-chatting, gossiping. But this new moon is really asking us to see all of that and to use it in a wise way. To avoid small talks, to avoid chit-chats, to avoid gossiping, and to really be aligned with our truth, to become a truth teller, not the storyteller. We all love storytellers, and we all love to hear stories, but it's time for us to shift from being a storyteller towards being a truth teller. And it's much more complex than being a storyteller or being the listener of storytellers, because it takes guts to be a truth teller, and it also takes guts to listen to the truth teller, to hear the truth teller. So we are all asked to live our truth, to be aligned with our truth. But truth is multi-layered and multidimensional, and it's changing in accordance to our perception. So our words are very important, because they are, as I always say, words are spells, and they shape our reality in a big way. So what kind of words and thoughts prevail in our everyday life? Because these are our mantras, and mantras have the power to create the grid of our reality. And that's what is going on, actually. So we are also questioning our spiritual path. We are questioning spiritual teachers that we are listening to. We are questioning astrologers that we are listening to. We are questioning the books that we've been learning from. And this is all leading us to something that cannot be learned, but earned. And this knowledge doesn't come from books. This knowledge comes from being able to go beyond the polarity. And this is Gemini. Even though Gemini is, of course, facts, knowledge, education, books, reading, writing, collecting information, sorting things out, using our intellect and rational mind, Mercury. But Gemini is much more than that. Also, Gemini, in esoteric teachings and metaphysical teachings, is the power of the union of the black and white. It's the yin and yang. It's the power of being able to see the whole and not choosing sides, being able to see that there is a little bit of good in evil and a little bit of evil in the good, and that it always intertwines. There is always a dance between the darkness and light. There is always dance between the good and the evil. There is always dance between the day and night. And we carry these principles within ourselves. And as long as we deny, as I said in the previous video, as long as we deny this darkness, as long as we deny or give power, we also give power to it. You know, when we deny something, we give the power to it, and we attract that into our life, and we continuously replay the record, and we feel stuck, of course. So this new moon in Gemini is a reminder that we carry within ourselves the both twins, Castor and Pollux. One is mortal, the other is immortal. So we carry both principles within ourselves. We are also mortal, but we are immortal beings at the same time. And we have the evil twin within ourselves. We have that side in ourselves, but it's a big difference when we can recognize this evil twin, when we acknowledge it, when we become aware of it, when we shine our light onto that evil twin and we reveal it. We reveal the existence of evil twin within ourselves, and then we can really do something about it. We can use it wisely. We can become whole, or we can at least work on becoming whole and acknowledging ourselves. No matter where we are with ourselves or what we do or how we feel, it's always an ideal moment to meet ourselves. And we are always invited to meet ourselves no matter how we feel, whether we are in mess or in happiness. It's time to meet ourselves. It's always time to meet ourselves. And this new moon is really giving us new perspective and new definition of who we are. And we are being asked, are we ready to face the truth of who we are fearlessly, to remove all those masks that we carry? Because Gemini part in us can have a tendency to pretend a lot, to pretend in order to amuse or entertain others, to pretend in order to be likable, to pretend in order to always be that cheerful role that others feel good around, being around. So there's also a lot more. Of course, this is just a superficial exam of how this can work, but we are really being faced with our own fake behavior and with pretending. And this is not our fault. And this is not only related to Geminis, of course, because this is something that we all do, because we all have Gemini somewhere in our chart. And without that aspect in our life, we wouldn't be able to talk. I wouldn't be able to record this video or to transfer any knowledge, because Gemini is about transferring knowledge, communication, transferring how I feel through words, through gestures, through mimics, through facial expressions. So without Gemini part, we wouldn't be able to communicate. And it's very important to know how to communicate. And because this is also one aspect of union, of being in the union and being able to bring together our hearts and minds. And Gemini is related to hands. Our hands are Gemini. Just like Aries is our head, Taurus is neck, Gemini hands, Cancer is chest, and so on and so on. So Gemini also deals with lungs and hands. So these are actually extensions of our heart. Our hands and fingers are extension of the heart. So when we want to express our feelings, we can also use our hands. When lovers hold each other's hands, they transfer, there is transmission of the heart feelings through the hands, through the touch of the hands. Also, when we shake hands with someone, that's a sign of connection, of meeting. We are making a contact. So these are very powerful things to know how we use our hands and what we create with our hands. And as we grow up, we use our hands in order to meet the world around us, to touch things. We learn a lot through touching, because when we touch something, we get to know it. And Also our lungs, very important to take care of our hands and our lungs. Our lungs, very important because this is the air that we breathe, and Gemini is an air sign. So the air that we breathe deeply impacts the way we think. It also has a strong effect on our mental processes. Gemini, thoughts and mental processes, air, the breath, breathing. It's very important to know how to breathe and to observe how we breathe, because we mostly breathe in a shallow way. And that's what our thoughts are like, and that's what our conversations are like. They are shallow, there is no depth. So we have to know how to truly breathe, to feel the breath, to feel the full breath of inhale and exhale, and to feel the depth of thoughts, the depth of words, the depth of conversations and communication. And this new moon is making a very supportive and friendly trine aspect with Pluto in Aquarius. This new moon is happening at 6 degrees of Gemini. So whoever has important planets or positions in the chart around the 6 degrees of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo and Pisces will feel this very strongly. And also in air signs, in Gemini, Libra and Aquarius, around the 6 degrees. And this Pluto is making this supportive aspect with this new moon and with the sun in Gemini. So we can expect some really helpful information, helpful news, helpful meeting, helpful contact, very supportive and friendly connection that will help us change our perspective, change our opinion about something, that will transform our way of communicating and our perspective. This is on a bigger scale, a big transformation of how we socialize, how we communicate, how we express our wants and needs. Because the tone that we use is very important. It's sending a signal to another person. And we are sensitive beings, we are human beings, we feel things, and we feel a lot of what is not expressed, of what is not said. We know that Gemini is sign of communication and words, but this is also a lot about what is not being said, what is not being shared, what is being said between the words in silence. It's also very important to know when to be silent and when to speak and when to listen, because we are being tested now to see how well we listen to each other. Because if we don't know how to listen to each other, then we don't know how to speak to each other. And if we don't know, if we are not telling something that should be said, this is going to be revealed now, because this new moon is really pushing us to say what needs to be said and to know what to skip saying. This is how we use the wisdom of knowing what is the right moment to share something. But also we cannot, we don't have the power over how others are going to interpret our words. So that's why it's very important that each of us take responsibility for our words and for what we don't share with others. We have to take responsibility for how we say certain things and how we share certain information. And during the time of this new moon, we are experiencing a transition point, because Saturn just changed signs 2-3 days before this new moon. And this is a big shift, because Saturn was in Pisces during the last 2 years, and it will come back into Pisces, but now it's in Aries. And Saturn in Aries is teaching us self-discipline, self-responsibility, self-mastery. and things are going to be a little bit slower than how we are used to do things, because Saturn slows things down and Aries wants to do things quickly right now. Like yesterday. And Saturn says, stop, slow down, take it easy, observe, listen, take responsibility, be cautious, check everything a couple of times. And it's about who we are. Aries, it's the self, it's who I am. So Saturn in Aries is going to bring us a lot of challenges and tests and pressures around who we are. And it's aligned with this new moon in Gemini. So our words, expressions, thoughts are very much related to Saturn in Aries and challenges that we are about to experience around who we are and how we express ourselves, how we present ourselves to others and to ourselves. And Jupiter is also still in Gemini during the time of this new moon. It's around the end of Gemini. Jupiter is about to leave Gemini on the 9th of June. So this new moon in Gemini is also giving us some big information, some big revelation about something that we thought is true or that we thought is lie. So we may see the shift, the switch of places of truth and lies. But lies are not something bad, actually, because we need lies as well as a reference to the truth. And sometimes, or maybe even very often, we reveal the truth thanks to lies. So it's time to really appreciate lies as well, and to stop lying to ourselves once we recognize those lies. But we may be faced with how well we've been lying to ourselves, because we've been taught to lie since we were born. This world, this whole system has been teaching us to live in a lie, to never express how we truly feel, and to never express what we truly want and need, to always pretend, because we are either about to be rejected or misunderstood or mistreated or abandoned or ignored or avoided if we express the truth. So we pretend. We learned how to pretend very well. We became masters of pretending, and we forgot that we are pretending. We completely forgot that this is pretending, and we became what we are, who we are pretending to be. And now it's time to face the fake selves, and to honor fake selves as well, because thanks to the fake self, we are able to come back to the true self, and instead of telling stories, to tell the truth. So this is very important time to understand how significant our words and thoughts are. But it's not so simple to just change mental pattern and to completely transform the perspective. But this new moon really opens the gates that make it easy for us, that make it much easier to change the perspective, because it will be something that is very obvious to us, that will be very transparent. And it's very good now to do our best to keep our debates and discussions and conversations as civil as possible, and to know that shouting isn't very effective. We need to have a dialogue and to be aware of our inner dialogues, of our monologues. What we tell to ourselves. Can we truly be honest without always justifying ourselves and finding excuses for how we behave or how we express ourselves? And, once voices get loud, no sense can be made, because this is where our nervous system withdraws, and it changes its structure. Our nervous system can be easily reset when we know how to put ourselves in that calm space where we don't get dismantled by our rapid thoughts and conclusions. And, anger for anger's sake, we are being faced with anger that is just being expressed because we don't have capacity to handle the anger. So we just express it without any control. So it's very important to observe and acknowledge and admit to ourselves that this is all within ourselves as well. And we easily lose the track of what we were discussing in the first place when we get in that shouting mode or mode of having a need to dominate others in conversations. The key here is to communicate, to come into the union through communication. Communication. Come into the union. Go beyond the polarity. Observe the polarity, because the polarity and oppositions will be very strongly exposed, because Gemini is, those polarities and dualities. But we live in a duality world, so it's something that is necessary. But we have capacity to see beyond that duality and to come back and to use our skills to live in the world of duality in the most constructive way. So communication really includes listening and asking follow-up questions and trying to be kind even when we don't agree. So it's a challenging time for communications and for expressions and for being real and true with who we are. We shouldn't, this doesn't mean that we completely dismiss and ignore what we want to say and express. Sometimes we definitely have to use the tone that is a bit louder in order to be heard. But it's also something that demands our conscious awareness, because we have to know when is the right time to do those things and to use our tone in that way. Do not shy away from expressing your viewpoints, because this is the point. We have to express our opinion. We have to. This new moon is actually teaching us how to understand each other a bit better. We definitely need to work on understanding each other a bit more, but we don't understand ourselves. So what can we expect? How can we expect others to understand us if we don't work on understanding ourselves? And all we want to do is others to tell us that we are right, and then we feel good, then we feel understood. But this is not the point. The point is to really work on mutual understanding and mutual trust. This is what the Gemini part in us wants. Castor and Pollux in mythology, they were twins and they were inseparable. But then they got separated. One mortal, one immortal. And there is this longing within ourselves, longing for that connection, longing for that reunion with our inner twin, with our heart and mind, because we are living in a mentally split and emotionally split world, and this is what we all carry. Whenever we feel misunderstood, we immediately slip into that split mode. So it's important to also acknowledge when we are feeling emotionally and mentally split. And we may be faced with a lot of people who are emotionally and mentally split. And it's our task to listen, to try to understand, and not to judge and accuse others for being emotionally and mentally split, but to really offer our true presence and our truth, not our stories. Let's be truth tellers, and let's allow others to be truth tellers. Let's allow others the freedom to express their truth without having to pretend, because they are afraid of how we are going to react. And this is a time when we are asked not to stir the pot unless we want to get burned, because reactions could be a bit crazy. But this is a very good time for learning, for studying, for sharing information, for transferring knowledge, for learning from others, from being able to learn from others, for asking others to teach us something that we don't know, for asking questions about things that we don't know, those who do know, instead of pretending that we know it all. And it's very important to know to say, I don't know something, because this opens many new doors for us and new perspectives of ourselves towards ourselves and of others towards ourselves. And let's remember that communication is a two-way affair which takes attention and commitment. It's not, because I see many people in communication, they just want to say their own thing, and they are not truly listening. So this new moon will show us, are we listening and are we being listened to? So this could be something that is uncomfortable to hear or to bear, but this is where the strength comes from, and our capacity to listen to others. If we are, friends, family, partners, business partners, do we know to listen to these people? Or are we always feeling triggered or irritated and frustrated by what they share or how they share it? It's time to really work on mutual understanding. And don't forget that Mercury is the sign of the twins, and we need to think twice before reacting or making some major decision. So Gemini is the sign of duality, so we may have to say things twice. We may have to think twice. We may have to explain something twice or do things twice. So let's not be lazy about it. Let's know that if we have to repeat something, let's repeat it. It's not such a big deal. Let's invest that time and energy because it's worthy. If it's worthy, the conversation, the communication, the mutual trust and understanding, then let's invest some of that time and energy into something that is valuable. And it's time to go beyond what we think we know. We may think we know something, but it may turn out that we had no idea. So this is a time when some new information can come in and change our perspective completely. And this can be some huge information because Jupiter is in Gemini and Jupiter expands everything it touches. So this can be some big revelation, some big news that completely changes our way of thinking and expressing and communicating. So it also helps to be transparent a little bit during this time. We also have to be careful not to speak every thought that comes into our head. Some things are better expressed when we are not so hyperactive. And, like the general archetype of Gemini, it's full of contradictions. And it can be both the evil twin and the good twin. And we can, it's very easy to experience someone leaving the conversation now, or we may be the one the ones who leave the conversation, just fly away from the conversation, let it go. It's also time for that. If we don't feel understood, heard, appreciated in conversation, we have a green light to leave the conversation without explaining ourselves too much. If we've already tried to understand each other, if we've already invested twice time and energy and nothing is happening, we are free to leave the conversation. And if others are leaving the conversation, it's also time to let them go. So it's a huge deal to deal with these energies. And it's very important to take a deep breath while communicating. We don't have to have an answer right away in our conversation with someone. We can sit still, be silent. That's also a conversation. That's also a big part of conversation, being silent, because we need time to process and hear what other person shared with us. So it feels like a huge deal when all we need to do is breathe that air for a while and then look again with new eyes and a calmer mind. So we may have to count to 10 in some conversations or in certain mental processes that we are going through. But let's do it. We are asked to sit down and breathe, to listen to our breathing. And we have to be aware that anyone that we share our story with also has a story of their own. And any roles we've given to someone else in our lives, they sure have named our character as well in their own book. So we are being faced with many roles that others have given to us. We are being faced with labels that others have put onto us. And it's time to remove some of those labels. It's time to change the roles. It's time for new roles. But not to pretend, but to step into the truth and to choose consciously the role. Not to just step into the role without any awareness of it. Not to step in the role because others want us to play that role. And we are resetting the mind. We are rewinding it. So we may also go back in order to move forward. It's time to speak the truth. But the truth is, as I said, multi-layered. Truth is changing according to our perspective. And the question is, can we step out of our roles and look into ourselves for who we truly are? And, if we can step out of our roles, of those strongest roles that we are playing, then we can maybe hear the truth. And, Gemini is not only intellect and duality, double sign twins, conflict between ego and shadow, conscious and unconscious, changeable, inconsistent. And, as we know, evolution comes through polarities. There needs to be a battle between yes and no in order to come out of certain situation. We need the battle between yes and no. We need the so-called battle between the light and dark, because this is what pushes us to work on ourselves, to improve ourselves. And we may be overloaded with news and information now. So it's really time to find some ways to calm our minds, to slow down, to let go of the thoughts that attack us, because they come as attack, and we feel like we have to defend. So it's time to really just observe our thoughts with calm mind, and try to use our time more efficiently and consciously, because time and information are strongly related. Gemini is information, news, messages, data, and time. Time is the ruler of this realm. And we all witness, and I already spoke about this before, we all witness how it looks like time is speeding up. It looks like we are living much faster. It looks like day passes by much faster than when we were growing up while we were children. It looks like we don't have time for anything. It looks like the time is leaking. And this is because of the overload of data, overload of information. We have so much going on in our minds. It's a big concentration, and we don't work on mental cleansing. We don't work on clearing our mental space, and we just stuff it and overload it more and more and more. There is so much junk information, and that's why it seems like time is going faster, because we use so much data. The technology is really upgrading at the speed of light. And technology itself is not the problem, but the way we use it or abuse it, the way we use our free time. What do we do in our free time? Do we keep scrolling? Our Facebook, Instagrams, TikToks? Do we just keep scrolling? Because this swallows our time. And when we use our free time in this way, what kind of message do we send to our being? That we are in need for what? So it's very important how we use our free time, because this has the power to stretch our perception of time and to stretch our perspectives, to see the bigger picture. Jupiter is in Gemini. We have the ability to see the bigger picture, to see things a bit clearer, and to be able to use the time efficiently, to use the time to become friends with time, and not to perceive time as our enemy, because we are always competing with time. So when we are overloaded with information, time leaks and things just go without our awareness. We don't notice anything that is going on around us, and we miss on so much. We miss the true connection. We miss the true communication. We miss to see the eyes of the other person while expressing their wants and needs and their opinions. We miss that alive moment. We miss the moment, and we miss the life, and we live in some kind of fog. We live in some kind of a dream where we are completely unaware of what's going on and where we are and where we're going. We don't even know what we were doing a couple of moments ago. Our memory is disturbed. We cannot trust our own memories. We cannot trust our own thoughts, because we are disconnected. It's time to reconnect. It's time to establish the connection. It's time to truly use the time wisely, and our words and thoughts. These are the tools for connecting with each other. And we are about to see how information changes our perspective, how one information has the power to completely change the vibration of our body and our nervous system. One information has the power to reset our nervous system. And we may be faced with some revelation of private information too. And we may see in the world leaking of information and secret data, and how much that affects us collectively and personally. And it's time for experimenting. We are experimenting with ourselves. and we are experimenting with our words and thoughts. We are forced to stop and question everything we know and believe. And we are about to see how little we know. And it's very much about this wisdom that I spoke about, the wisdom of knowing when to be silent and quiet. And to know that our presence matters equally as our absence. It is felt when we are not in the room, when we are not around, it is really felt. And this is a time to see how we are felt by others, how our presence or absence is felt, and how our presence and absence is felt within ourselves. Do we feel our own presence and absence? Can we tell when we are present and when we are not present? And it's very important to take a break, to listen to that space between words, to pause, because silence and pauses are also related to Gemini, and we need that space between. Just like the glyph of Gemini, those two straight lines, those two pillars, there's a space between them, and we are moving through that space. The path is narrow, but that's why it's important to be focused, to be true, to be real, in order to move directly between those two words and worlds and those two extremes. Because we are either, one or another. We jump from one to another because we are messy and we don't know, how to stay centered. We don't know how to be centered. So we are continuously being like ping pong. So it's time to really be centered and to observe our thoughts without giving them too much attention and power, and to try to imagine, we can do this mentally. It's a technique to imagine that we are moving between two pillars, and to imagine that the path is really narrow and that we have to be very still. And this is something that is practiced, just like breath and breathing, and understanding that not saying anything sometimes is the real thing. It's with saying nothing we say everything. But sometimes people feel they really have to say something, and it's important to know how we use our words. And it's how we interpret the information. This is very important. It's not just about what information is shared with us, or what we read or listen, but how we interpret it. The way we interpret something is the way that defines our reality. And it's not so simple that when we change our thoughts, we change our world. It's not so easy. We have to listen, to watch, to observe, to feel. New moon in Gemini. This is moon, the feelings, the intuition, and Gemini words and logic. So we have to feel those words. We have to feel those thoughts. That's what changes the reality, not just what we think. It's not so easy. We have to really come into union to understand the power of communication between the heart and mind, to learn their language. And it's time to see when something is just beautifully packed, when something is just in a beautiful box. It only looks beautiful, but when we unpack it, nothing is there. And this can be the Gemini energy too. Just like, we are presenting something as great and beautiful and magical, but when when the real thing happens, nothing is there. So it's very important to know, to discern what is really valuable and what is not valuable, and to know who to trust, and to learn how to trust ourselves. And sometimes we need to do opposite from what we normally do, and this could be a time for that. And our thoughts need to reach our feelings, hands and heart, deeply connected expression of our soul. Hands and fingers, our antennas, our connection to ether. Writing, when we are writing something, when we are writing about our feelings, it's going through our hand. We write with our hand and we express our feelings there. It's an extension of the heart. And it's time to acknowledge that we are dual beings. We are not just one that we are aware of. We have multiple personalities within ourselves. And Gemini really reveals that to us. Each twin has its own double as well. And then their own double have their own doubles. And it goes on and on. But our task is to observe them all, to see them all, to have them all on our number. And these are all aspects of our psyche, archetypes that live within us and that awaken through us, that play their roles through us. And we are given opportunity to understand eternal and temporary, heaven and earth, active and passive, good and evil, tree of knowledge. It's time to become rooted in that tree of knowledge. Just as this tree, it has those roots, and then it goes up, and it goes into many different branches. So it's time to know that this is all one. But sometimes we identify ourselves with a branch. Then we go to another branch and we say, oh, I'm like this. Then we see another branch and say, oh no, I'm like this. But these are all branches of one tree. And it's time for us to remember that we are one. But we also have multiple expressions of who we are. We all have different expressions of who we are, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. And it's time to learn how to use those different expressions of who we are in the most marvelous way, in the wisest way. And it's very important to know what we can share with who. We cannot talk about the same things with everyone. And we have to choose wisely. And to see what's eating us, what's been eating us. This new moon is going to ask us, what is eating you? And how you can, understand yourself, how you can communicate with yourself in a way that you don't feel guilty, that you don't feel ashamed, that you don't feel like you have to defend or justify or explain yourself, but just to really admit it to yourself and be there with yourself. And through that acceptance and presence, to feel the oneness of who you are. So we are learning how to truly translate our emotions now. And the question is, what does it mean to speak the same language with the whole world and with all that we feel and that we are? And with this, I would end this forecast. I love you all and see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.